Hello, credit union executives. Welcome to See You on the Show, where we give you up-to-date information on how you can reduce risk, keep key talent, and take a strategic approach to your personal financial wellness. Hosted by me, Doug English, a certified financial planner and former credit union insider with ACT Advisors. Welcome to See You on the Show, Charles Shanley. I'm delighted to have you join me today.
Thank you, Doug. It's a pleasure.
Charles, I've seen your name in the credit union movement for a long time, so I know you're making good things happen. Tell me, how did you get started working with credit unions? And then tell me what activity you're involved in on a day-to-day basis today.
That's a great question. Well, I guess, it all started, I come from a family of headhunters from the Northeast. My father was a chemical engineer, and he got a call from a recruiter one day, and he was so interested in what that person did for a living. He moved us all to Texas to start up his own recruiting firm, and that was 47 years ago. So I've kind of cut my teeth in all that. My brother owns his own search firm, but working with the family business was really not my cup of tea, so I went it on my own. And after that, for a period of time, I started working for now a competitor of mine. This is 25 years ago, and we specialize in credit union placement, executive placement, CEO placement. And did that for a number of years until I got recruited myself to start up a search division for a larger company and build out that whole search practice, and specifically in credit unions and banking. So we played on both sides, and I did that for 14 years, and eventually kind of took that division into a standalone, which is my company today, Shanley Search. And I've been cruising along for well over 6 years now and loving it.
There's some very, very special people in this movement, and I'm glad to see you recruit them into successful positions. So what does that mean on a day in, day out basis? Like, what does your normal work week look like?
Today, lately, we've been doing more CEO placements than anything else, it seems like. And I think we have 7 open across the country and 2 under contract that are coming in just for CEO for credit unions alone. So my involvement is really, obviously running the company, but I tend to get a lot more involved on the board side when working with boards on CEO placement. I'll typically will run a lot of those projects, those CEO projects, but we do anything really C-level below that. And oftentimes, this is a relationship business, and it's all about, building relationships, and always has been. And we never have really had any sales. It's all word of mouth, and that's done really well for us. And so it's a matter of just doing a good job for folks and being fair and honest. The bulk of what I do today is working with credit union boards and credit union CEOs, and just being in the industry, love the industry. It's all about the passion, and it's much different than working our banking side, I would say. And it's funny, you get a bunch of bankers in a room and they'll curse the credit union industry all day long, but you get a banker by himself in the room, he'll step aside and go, "Hey, I've always wanted to work for a credit union." So I love working this industry, and passionate for what I do. But that's day in, that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm either interviewing candidates or talking with boards or talking with folks like yourself, just networking and getting to know people in the industry.
So you've been at it a long time in aggregate between those things. So tell our listeners a bit about the trends. We all know the data that there's a huge number of folks running credit unions that are in their early 60s and are going to be retiring very soon. Are you seeing that in the actual data as far as the openings? I think you said you had 7 right now. But when you look across the industry, what does the data tell us about the volume of turnover that we're seeing these days?
That's a great question. I would say before, it was mostly retirements. Most of the work we're doing, the baby boomers retiring. And, these past couple of years, I think out of those 7, I think half are retirements and half are forced retirements, I would call it. And the ones that are forced retirements are just a lack of vision and innovation are the 2 areas where CEOs are no longer working, or it's just the culture has gone in a different direction. So right now it's about half and half. I'd say retirements and terminations is the other half of that. In the past, it was definitely leaning stronger towards just the retirement side. But there's a lot of change. It's a changing environment, and there's a whole list of competencies we look for in CEOs today, and a lot of those have been the same. A lot of those are new. We've always looked for probably culture fit as number 1, with vision and innovation probably right underneath there, and some strategy and the execution of strategy. The DEI, emotional intelligence is definitely creeping up the ladder, and just adaptability in general, changing times, changing economies, changing regulations. That has been a pretty core competency these days. Of course, you got the overall experience you're looking for, but it's changing. What we look for is changing. or we're looking for innovation. And it depends really a lot on the size of the institution sometimes. If you're looking at $1 billion plus, it's somewhat a different thing that we're looking for in a $300 million credit union. So it depends on the board, depends on the culture, depends on their strategy, if they're conservative or they want to grow. And hopefully more and more are wanting to grow these days, and they are.
How about just the raw number of openings across the industry? I would expect that the curve would be upward sloping, that we would be seeing every year, probably at a not steady rate, but every year we would see an increasing number of folks leaving the executive suite because of retirement, just because that's the baby boomer tail, right, coming off. Are you seeing that? Is that happening?
Oh, of course, absolutely. A lot of the retirements in all levels, the structure kind of has changed. In the past, it was loyalty meant a lot, and you were loyal and you stayed there for a really long time, and people love that. Today it's not quite the case. We put out a proposal today, and it's for a CEO search, and the person's been there for 30 years. That's very, very common on the retirements that we see today. That's probably not going to be the same moving forward. We see candidates moving along every 5 years, whether it's for career advancement, going to a larger institution and becoming more innovative. That's a big change from the past. You don't see the long tenure like you used to have. Most of the retirements we have, they are those long tenure at the same institution for a long period of time, which is great. The boards are changing somewhat because they haven't gone through a process before in a long period of time, if they have. And it might be that they had an internal candidate and they just, that's how they did it in the past. And so there's a lot of education, I think, that happens with boards today on what has changed in the environment, what has changed even from the compensation side. The whole industry has been changing dramatically in just the last 10 years.
You just said candidates moving along every 5 years. Let's go a little further into that, because I'm imagining that a lot of those, maybe even almost all of those boards, were very negatively affected when that occurred. The candidate moved on after 5 years, and you as the board probably thought you were going to maintain that candidate. Can you tell us some stories about when you've seen that kind of thing happen, and even more importantly, what they could have done to prevent?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it does hurt a credit union when you're only there for 5 years. I mean, it takes up to a year just to get things going and start building. And it does hurt them when they leave within that time period. On our side, the people we place, we like to hear a 10-year commitment on the minimum side. We like that they make a 10-year commitment, but that's not always the case. And so there are a number of things you can do. I heard years ago, and I think it holds true today, is that the number one reason why CEOs leave is a lack of challenge. They're looking for changing, for growing. And if a board is stagnant, they don't want to grow, they don't want to try new things, that candidate's not going to stay. If they're an innovative candidate, and that's what you're looking for today. So that's probably a big area of it too. The things you can do are changing the environment. I love it when, and you never hear this, but in the banking side, but when you have a credit union CEO and every couple of years they'll change out their C team and they'll switch up the responsibility. So they truly have aspirations for their team members to become a CEO one day if they want to. And so they'll do that in helping develop those people. You never hear about it on the bank side, but they're okay with them leaving for another opportunity. I love to hear that. If you're doing things like that, they're going to stay. They want to learn. They want to grow. Of course, there's the compensation parameters, and you can always put a SERP on it, the golden handcuff to keep them around for a period of time. That's the easy way to do it, I would suppose. But keep it exciting. Give them more responsibility. Let them grow. Allow them to grow. Give them more educational opportunities. Go to Carville Leadership, additional training, MQ CEO Institute. Even Finally does the Emerging Leaders Program. And there's a number of examples of things and what people should be doing if they want to grow in their career. But I think that's a big part of it, is supporting the people that work for you and allowing them to take on new challenges.
Interesting. So you spent more time talking about non-economic rewards rather than economic rewards. And would you say that in your experience, that is the way the candidates rank the priority of why they left? Is it non-economic issues over economic?
Yeah, I'd say it's non-economic, and I'd say it's not tied really to the money. We do financial compensation analysis on every search we do at the very beginning of the process. We have all the surveys out there. We have our own data that's even a little more accurate than survey data, but we want to make sure that your range there, or the client's range, the credit union's range, is within the market. And as long as you're paying market, we're still going to be okay, but it's the other things that become more important. If money is your number one motivator, you're probably going to not make it through our search process. The motivating factors are going to have to be different. You don't want this position for the right factors. What's motivating you, whether it's the area, the level of what you can learning and growing from this institution. And so those things are more important to us as a search firm than hearing about money. Money could be the driver to have those competitive ranges. I got off the phone with a board member last week, and their CEO left because there wasn't a SERP in place. Well, he was there for 30 years, and they had the opportunity to educate themselves on what a SERP was. And he was so upset with himself because they turned it all down and he left. And then when they realized what a SERP could be, they would have been up for it. And so you have to be educated constantly, knowing what's going on in the industry, be aware of the industry. And a lot of those boards where they haven't been going to conferences or staying in touch, and part of it's the CEO responsibility too, making sure that the board is educated on all of those areas and attending conferences. So they're up to date on that information so those things don't happen down the road.
You said another thing that keyed my thoughts. If you like the executive, retain them with a SERP. However, there must be times, probably many times, when a credit union wants to recruit somebody even though they already have a SERP. So how do you deal with that? Do they just pay more money to overcome that, or do they just put a bigger SERP on top of it? What's the strategy when that happens?
That's a good question. So as a search firm, that kind of stops us cold sometimes, and it does what it's supposed to. That handcuff, it's all a lot of it's based on cliff vesting, where you have to stay X amount of years before you leave. But yeah, if it's at the end of that cliff vesting, they're not leaving probably, and they shouldn't want to leave. And it becomes a big challenge for us to recruit them away. It is effective. There are things you can do. The candidates that we speak with, and they have a SERP, we go into the details. We try to figure out what they're losing. Like I said, it depends on asset size, but really, if you're crediting over 100 million in assets, you should be talking about SERPs. It can stop us dead, but the things that the credit union can do is you can provide some kind of a sign-on, override that, which we've had. We did that last year with a large credit union, but you're probably going to have to put a SERP in place. I think the most common are kind of the split dollar these days. Some of the F plans are moving away from those areas, but you have to do something to offset that. But the candidate may not want to even leave because of that. A lot of times, once they're vested, then they're available again. So sometimes all about the timing of it all.
It's kind of like a hacker telling you, if you use that software, I pretty much can't hack your system. If you put a SERP in place, I'm probably not going to be able to recruit your executives out of your credit union.
It can be effective. Sure can. Yeah.
If you are a senior executive trying to recruit for the SVP level, any kind of top 3 ideas for making the top hire, for things that the senior executive can be doing, not the board now, but the senior executive?
I think it's a lot of working on yourself and gaining more responsibility. I can look at a resume and I can tell that they have aspirations to move in their career and they're making the decisions in their life to go that direction. We're looking for upper mobility, obviously, and taking on more responsibility. They're volunteering for more responsibility. They're getting more involved in the community. Depends on the role, of course, but they're getting more certifications. They're going to get that MBA. If they're not, they're getting the CCE through Qs, or like I mentioned, some of the leadership programs you can do. Those things are quite effective. And a lot of that provides networking. Networking in this industry is huge. It's a small industry. That's how we find a lot of our candidates. It's not about posting the position. It's about the networks you have. It's about the people you know. And so use that. If not, get into those networks, whether it's networks within what you're doing, whatever it be the retail side, the finance side, or being on boards. It becomes very strategic on what your approach is. Maybe working with your CEO, making sure that your CEO is aware of your aspirations. Get on a development program. It kind of goes into succession planning a little bit. It's this huge word, that succession planning. Well, does anybody really do it? It's not really. And so, you always talk about succession planning, but it's rarely done. It might be done at the CEO level, but it's really not done below that. And that's what you should be doing. Push your CEO. Tell them you want to be further developed. You have aspirations to be at that C level. It's a lot about working on yourself and determining what your goal is, what you want to become, and then making the steps to do that.
Thank you for those ideas. I know I should go more into those, but I listen to what you say, and then I think of another idea, which is you're running a $100 million credit union. You're the CEO, and you really have this vision that you want to run a $300 million or $500 million credit union. You're at the league events and you're doing the training and you're networking. Are you actually trying to network with the board members as well? Are you trying to make a name for yourself? The activities that are going on the board, like what are the key things you do to really stand out in the space? Anything in particular?
Yeah, well, there's a lot you can do. I mean, 100 million, it's a little small these days, but if you wanted to be a $300 million credit union, the biggest things you could do is find out what the trends are and start working on innovation and building that out. I mean, $100 million, you may be outsourcing quite a bit. When you're moving to a larger credit union, you're going to bring some of those things in-house and you're looking for additional revenue streams. But the state of New York has this great group. It's a CEO networking group. You can be any asset size, really. And it's just a bunch of CEOs that get together and talk things through. That's just one example. There's examples of that all across the country. Be a part of these local CEO network groups. It'll go a long way. You share ideas, and it puts you in the room with credit unions that are larger, maybe even smaller than you too. So you talk about the troubles, but that's just, once again, building that network. Yeah, it helps going to conferences and talking with as many people as you can. Don't just go to the conference, go to the session. And I go to those conferences and I sit in all those sessions. It's about the networking for us, but you'd be surprised at how many people really don't go to those sessions. But yeah, just push yourself. See who's out there. Get involved.
There's a lot of recruiting firms. Some of them do a variety of things, right? They do recruiting and they do other things. How does the board even begin to figure that out? I know that the standard process is to find 3 firms and talk to the 3 of them and figure out which one you want to do. You've been in the industry a long time on your own and then as part of a larger organization a couple of different times. So how would you suggest an executive team evaluate a search partner? Tell us a bit about that.
That's a great question. There's a number of questions that the board or that search committee should be asking that firm, starting with what's your experience with working with other boards on CEO placement, and specifically, what experience do you have working in this market? Their internal candidates are always involved in any process. It doesn't matter to us. Internal candidates go through the same process, just like the external candidate, every single step. And so they're evaluated just the same. You need to be asking success rate, of course. What's their guarantee period? Those are questions they should be asking. It's not about pricing. We're going to be probably right in there with everybody else on the price. We may charge even a little bit more. I think the biggest thing is who also is going to be working on that project. I don't work on all projects for our company, but I work on most of our CEO projects directly. So who are you working with? That's a question they need to ask. What are their ties to industry? What's their process for interviewing candidates? Are they doing behavioral interviewing? Are you doing profile testing? We do profile testing. You can be a really good interviewer and have the right answer to any question, whether it's you or not. And so testing kind of helps us. It allows us to make sure they are who they say they are. You can't rely on the testing. There's a lot of components that go into a search process, probably more than we want to talk about today. But there's project questionnaires you have candidates do, and there's a lot of these little steps, a lot of different tools that we use along the way. We're on the interviews with the boards. We're recording those interviews, and you have to walk the search firm through the whole process itself. And I think our biggest strategy, well, it's not a strategy, it's our word of mouth is our biggest sales for us. But I think it's really because we're just fair and honest. We call candidates back. We give them feedback. If they don't make it, if they don't get presented, if they have, truly want to be a CEO one day or want that SVP role, we want to help them. And so it's providing them with that constructive feedback. I think that stands out a lot. It's not just a numbers game. We're going to make enough money to keep the lights on and put in our pocket, but it's what's the long term here. We spend a lot of time on the front end, getting to know people, getting to know that institution. We're on site, we're working with that board, we're meeting the team, we're spending a lot of time just understanding the culture. Culture is number one. It's the most important thing we look for. But sometimes there's a broken culture. So sometimes it's finding somebody that has worked through that. You might think your culture is perfect, but when we start digging in and we're there for a day or so, we're going to find some holes in there, if there are any, and we're going to share that with you. So it's a full analysis all the way around. And like I said, just being fair to people and doing a good job and just enjoying what you do, I think, too, comes out.
Have you had any situations where you got fooled, where there was a candidate and a board and you went through the whole process and really thought they were a fit for each other, and then they got together and something blew the relationship up? Any thing like that that's happened where you had some takeaways you can tell us about?
I wish I did. I've seen it happen, and that's why we're hired part of it. So that all happened. We got this candidate, and it wasn't what we thought, and then we ended up hiring you. Nothing recent that really comes to mind. I'm being honest here too, Doug. And because of all those steps you do, you know it's right, and there shouldn't be anything that should come up. And if it's done right, it should stick.
Charles, thank you for your work in the credit union movement and helping the very, very important ability of this movement to recruit and to retain a top talent in the C-suite. It is absolutely critical. I think you're a part of what's making the movement strong. So thank you for the work you do. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
My pleasure. No, just love the industry. Let's keep it going. It's a great industry. We love working it. It's just got a great feeling all the way around. And that's why I love working it. And it's just a wonderful thing to be a part of.
Charles Shanley from Shanley Search Partners, thank you for joining us today. And we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Doug. All right, take care.
That's all the insider credit union knowledge we have for this episode. Are you enjoying the conversation? Be sure to subscribe and share your thoughts with other credit union leaders by leaving us a review. See you next time on See You on the Show.
The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual security. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. Indexes are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly.